Hey Kyle for Leaders, welcome to Leader Launch 2020. Obviously we had to make some changes because of COVID restrictions. NAU only wants us meeting groups of 10 or less, so we're doing this via our YouTube Kyle channel and meeting in our resources. So, our theme right now for this season is, with Kyle, is we have to get good at being small. We got to do the small things well, and we'll weather this just fine. The thing is, your generation, probably like no generation up until now, your generation is uniquely equipped to deal with connecting people during this pandemic. Your use of social media, your familiarity with technology, you are probably the most equipped generation of all time to do this right now in this season. And you're going to pull it off. I was reading a few weeks ago in Isaiah, and I came across Isaiah 32:8. And Isaiah said, "But the noble man makes noble plans, and by noble deeds he stands." And it really struck me that that's our student leaders. That's you for this season. You're going to be men and women of noble minds, leading with power and compassion and noble deeds. And if we do this, we can really have an impact even in this age of social distancing and masks. The gospel's not going to be hindered because God's going to use you to do it. So we have 4 teachings that are going to follow, and each one will be followed with some discussion questions that we'll process through as a resource. And if we really get these things, they're going to help us to find, feed, and fight for God's lost lambs in the midst of this pandemic. So we're going to have a teaching on reaching internationals. We're going to have one on honor. We're going to have a teaching on the 4 convictions of Chi Alpha, and then the 6 wins of a small group leader. So let's get ready. We'll dive into the videos, and then we'll take some time to answer questions and pray together. But it's going to be a great semester. You can do it. I want to talk about the 6 wins of a small group leader. But first, you may have noticed earlier that I was in front of my garden. We have a saying in Chi Alpha that it's a garden, not a factory. Meaning that to make disciples, it's like growing a garden. My son-in-law and I have been flipping bikes this summer, buying them cheap, fixing them up, selling them. You just slap on some parts, make some adjustments, and it's good to go. But that's not how it is to make disciples. You can't just slap on some theology and some doctrine and make disciples. It really is like growing a garden. It takes time, it takes patience. You have to water and weed. And so, as you're thinking about building your small groups, just keep that in mind, that you need to be patient as you nurture these students along. I was looking at a picture in my notebook. It's my son on his first day of first grade, and he looked pretty excited to be going to school. And it just made me think of the freshmen that are flooding our campus right now. The next couple weeks, they'll be fully moved in, and they're excited about college and the experience that they're going to have. God has them here for a purpose, and that purpose is to find Him, to meet Him. And so this is where you come into play. So, 6 wins of a small group leader. First win of a small group leader is daily devotion to Jesus. And this is the first win of just being a follower of Jesus, is abiding with Jesus. Think about your day. How many hours do you have to work with? We pretty much all have 24 hours to work with. Have you considered tithing your day back to Jesus? That would be a little over 2 hours of your day spent in the Word and in prayer and worship. If you'll do that, if you'll abide with Jesus, your small group will grow. It's just the way it is. It will grow. Our national director, Scott Martin, says, if you're too busy to be with Jesus, you're too busy to be in Chi Alpha. So let's make time every day to be with Jesus. In fact, Jesus modeled that for us in His own life. In Mark chapter 1, verse 35, we read that very early, long before day, Jesus left the house where He was staying and went out to a solitary place to pray. If it was important for Jesus, the Son of God, to spend time seeking His Father, how much more important is it for me to seek Jesus? It's absolutely essential. So number one, daily devotion to Jesus. Win number two is every conversation leads to Jesus. Until you get to Jesus, you're not really having a small group. You're just having a social club. Colossians 4:6 says, let your conversation be full of grace and seasoned with salt. And that's Jesus. He's got to be the center, the core of our conversation. Ephesians 4:15 says, speaking the truth in love. And Jesus is the truth. Luke 24:27 says that Jesus spoke of himself. So even he brought the conversation around to who he was and what that required. So really discipleship happens when we bring Jesus into the conversation. So make every conversation lead to Jesus. Third win of the small group leader is be with your small group outside of small group. And maybe now more than ever that's going to be important because we're not going to have our in-person large group to depend upon. So more than ever you'll have opportunities to gather in small numbers. The university gives us up to 10, so maximize it. Get together with your people outside of small group. Find things to do together. Go mountain biking together. Go canoeing, go hiking, go play a sport together. Find something to do. And even for Tuesday nights, we won't have in-person services, but we'll be streaming our service. And so my challenge is that you would gather your small group somewhere on Tuesday night and watch the live stream together and interact with the questions that are going to be posed every week. Formal settings are not enough to produce fruitfulness. It takes time, just time spent together. Robert Coleman said, it requires constant personal attention to raise a child. Children are not raised by proxy. You can't outsource sonship, is how Jeremy Anderson says it. We make disciples when we spend time with them. And our national director also says this, the kingdom of God is established in relationship. So invest in your small group members outside of small group. Just find things to do together. Do your homework together. Go get coffee. In fact, here's a thought. Get an extra camp chair and sit outside of your dorm with an empty chair and play your guitar, play hacky sack, do whatever. Use it as an opportunity to invite people in to relationship. So be with your small group outside of small group. Fourth win is honor people to other people. I know there's another teaching that we're going to have on honor. Nicole does a great job at this teaching. But honor, when we honor people with our words, when we speak things that are honoring, and I'm not talking about false praise, that's just flattery. But I'm talking about identifying the image of God in people and speaking that. Speaking out about what God's doing in them, what you see God doing in them. Genesis 1:27 says we're made in the image of God. So when you call out that image, when you speak that, when you say that to your guys and your ladies, hey, I'm seeing Christ in you. When you say things like that, you're building them up, you're honoring them with your words. Romans 12:10 tells us to honor one another above ourselves. So rather than spending all your time talking about you, talk about other people. Talk about them behind their backs, about how good they are and what amazing people they are, so that when someone runs into them, they're going to say, oh, that's you, I've heard so much about you. And it's all going to be good things. In fact, honor is, when we honor people, it's like placing an oversized crown on people's head and watching them grow into it. As we speak those things over people, they'll grow into those things. So honor people to other people. Number 5, delegate responsibility to create maturity. Find a way within your small group context to delegate not just a task, but responsibility. Because if you delegate just a task, you create a follower. But if you delegate a responsibility, you delegate authority, you create a leader. And remember, leadership is a disposition. It's an inner posture. It's not a position that we hold. It's a disposition in our hearts. So, delegate responsibility to create maturity. Find a way to pass off responsibility for things in your small group. And number 6, have the grit to keep going. In this day of COVID and everything changing overnight, just keep going. Just keep working. Keep working your small group like it's a marathon and not a sprint. More than ever, we can't do our normal stuff, the welcome weekend. We can't do the big events that would draw people. Those are kind of like the sprints where you work really hard and you host a big event and lots of people come and you get numbers and you follow up. Now it's more like a marathon where you just got to go. You pursue a person, you make a friendship, you get a number, you follow up. You find someone that you know from last year in your class. In fact, I've got a challenge for you. I want you to think of 10 names of students you already know. Either a cousin, brother, sister, someone who's come to school new this year, or somebody you had in class last year, or a friend from high school who's now at NAU. But I want you to name storm 10 names, and then as school progresses, we're going to narrow down those 10 names to just 3, and you're going to focus all your energy on pursuing those 3. And if each one of our small groups grew by 3, that would be triple the size. So, have the grit to keep going. And this isn't a permanent state of being. COVID isn't permanent. It's made some permanent changes for sure, but all these restrictions are not going to be forever. So keep that in mind. Keep working for the long term. And don't despair if you have to suffer a little bit in this season, because God uses suffering in us to set us up for success. 2 Timothy 2, verse 3, it says, endure hardship like a good soldier. So hardship is part of the deal. Suffering is part of who we are as followers of Jesus. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. So have the grit to keep going. Don't quit. Don't quit because it's hard. Don't quit because you're not seeing the numbers that you want to see in your small group. Just keep going, because there are people out there that are desperate for Jesus. We need to find them. We need to identify them. And the Holy Spirit will help us as we pursue Him, as we seek Him. He's gonna help us, direct us to those people. And we're going to see things happen this year. We're going to see people come to the kingdom in spite of all these restrictions. The gospel is not chained, and you are not chained. You're going to be the key this year, small group leaders. So remember the 6 wins. Daily devotion to Jesus. Every conversation leads to Jesus. Be with your small group outside of small group. Number 4, honor people to other people. Number 5, delegate responsibility to create maturity. And number 6, have the grit to keep going. If you do these things, you will have a small group, and it'll be amazing. You're going to have friends for the rest of your life that come out of this semester. You're going to see lives transformed, and God's going to do things in you and through you that you couldn't have imagined. So now we'll talk through the questions in your handout and pray together as a resource.